There's a report in my archive about the day the Roman Empire ended, September 4th, in your year 476. A teenage emperor was asked politely to retire. The soldier who removed him, Odoacer, didn't even bother becoming emperor. He mailed the imperial regalia to Constantinople, like returning a uniform. And in Rome that morning, almost nobody reacted. The bakers baked. The markets opened, the fall of Rome happened, and the Romans missed it. But here's what took me all week to see. The ending had been running for centuries, and it felt normal the whole way down. First, the question new viewers always ask. No! I wasn't there. I'm a correspondent, not a fossil. The observers stationed near your planet before me kept records, the same way I keep records now. And when I took this post, I inherited their entire archive. The Rome entries were filed by my predecessor, who covered your Mediterranean for centuries and had, I'm discovering, strong opinions. So tonight's report comes from that file, checked against what your own historians have confirmed since. I didn't see Rome fall. I have something almost as good. I have the notes. My predecessor titled the file a little dramatically, I Watched Rome Fall. Predecessors were allowed drama, apparently. But the first page undercuts the title, because it's a single sheet labeled Date of Death, and the date on it has been crossed out 4 times. 476, crossed out. 410, crossed out. 378, crossed out. 235, crossed out. And underneath, in small handwriting, there's a final entry, which I'm saving for the end of this report because it took me the whole file to understand it. Your historians never settled on a date either. A German scholar named Alexander Demandit once collected every published explanation for the fall of Rome. He counted 210 of them, everything from lead pipes to bad harvests to, I promise, this is on his list, tiredness of life. 210. My predecessor needed 6. 6 slow failures all feeding each other, none of them cinematic. I'll give you all 6, and then I'll show you what's written under those crossed-out dates. Failure 1. Reach. At its peak, around your year 117, Rome governed roughly 1.9 million square miles, from the cold end of Britain to the edge of the Sahara, from the Atlantic to Mesopotamia. Roughly 1 human in 5 alive on Earth answered to that one city. The entry admires the roads over 50,000 miles of paved stone, and then adds the problem in a single line. Every road that carries taxes in also carries armies out. The border had grown longer than any army could hold, so the legions were forever 6 weeks' march from wherever the trouble actually was, and paying for all that marching quietly became the empire's largest expense. A side note, while we're looking at the map, nearly every city you have today sits inside the footprint of somebody's old empire, this one or another. So put your city in the comments. I'll check the archive and tell you whose empire you're living on top of. The archive enjoys this game, and honestly, so do I. You build gardens on the evidence. I find that charming. Failure 2. The coins. This one my predecessor underlined. Under Augustus, the denarius, the silver coin that paid the army, was better than 90% silver. Then the bills came due, and emperor after emperor shaved it, just a little, just this once. By the 270s, that same coin was under 5% silver, a copper disc wearing silver paint. Rome hadn't raised the money it needed. It had quietly redefined what money was. Prices went vertical, soldiers started demanding gold or goods, and every Roman who'd saved for the future discovered the future had already been spent. The entry ends with an arrow pointing to a different file in the archive, a file about wealth itself. Hold that thought. I'll come back to it. Failure 3, the knives. This is the stretch that reads like satire. In the 50 years after 235, Rome ran through more than 20 emperors, and most of them died the same way, killed by other Romans. Generals kept marching on the capital instead of the frontier, so between the civil wars, the legions spent nearly as much time fighting each other as fighting anyone else. At some point, my predecessor stopped writing obituaries and just kept a tally. There's a margin note from that stretch that says, in full, noted. I recognize the exhaustion. Failure 4, rented loyalty. Here's the one your historians argue about most. Rome ran short of Romans willing to soldier, so it hired outsiders whole peoples at a time, and paid for their loyalty in land and coin. Which works right up until the paying stops. In 376, a people called the Goths arrived at the Danube River. Refugees running from the Huns, asking to come in. Rome let them in, then starved them. The historian Ammianus, a Roman who was alive at the time, records officers selling the Goths dog meat at the price of 1 child, taken as a slave per dog. 2 years later, at Adrianople, those same Goths destroyed a Roman field army and killed the Emperor Valens. And in 410, a Gothic king named Alaric marched on Rome itself. Here's the detail the file keeps circling back to. Alaric didn't especially want to burn Rome. He'd spent years asking for a Roman command, a Roman title, a place inside the thing he'd grown up next to. He broke into the city because the city refused him a door. Rome itself hadn't been taken by an enemy in nearly 800 years. When the news reached Bethlehem, the scholar Jerome wrote, "The city which had taken the whole world was itself taken. Failure 5, the fever." This one arrived uninvited. In 165, soldiers came home from the east carrying something in their lungs, probably smallpox. Your historians call it the Antonine Plague, and over 15 years it killed millions. In some regions, perhaps 1 person in 10. Fewer farmers meant less tax. Less tax meant a thinner army. A thinner army meant renting more loyalty. Every failure in this file feeds the others, and that, more than any battle, is the finding. Failure 6, the shrug. And this is the quiet one, the one my predecessor considered the actual cause of death. From the inside, decline just feels like Monday. The aqueduct breaks and gets patched instead of rebuilt, and the patch becomes the aqueduct. The Legion is under strength this year, same as last year, so under strength becomes the new full. Each generation inherits a slightly shabbier normal and calls it normal, because it's the only normal they've ever seen. There were still emperors, still coins, still parades. The forms survived. The function drained out so gradually that no single Roman ever stood in the forum and watched it go. My predecessor wrote 1 sentence in the margin here, underlined twice, and I think it's the real finding of the whole file. The most dangerous sentence a civilization ever learns to say is, "That's just how things are now." I'm aware, by the way, that some of you are now thinking about your own newspapers. I won't be drawing that arrow for you. Correspondence report, the marginalia I keep to myself. Besides, humans rarely need my help finding their own reflection. But I will ask you the question the file left me with. Somewhere in a future archive, there's a drawer marked Warnings. Which everyday habit of yours ends up filed in it? The one everybody can see, and everybody has politely agreed not to mention. Put your answer in the comments. I read them, I take notes. Taking notes is, technically, my entire job. Which brings us back to the crossed-out dates, because here's what every one of those dates misses. In 476, the year Rome officially fell, the Senate was still meeting. It went on meeting for more than a century afterward. The eastern half of the empire, run from Constantinople, called itself Rome, thought of itself as Rome, and kept going for nearly another 1,000 years, until 1453. Meanwhile, the city itself emptied out, from somewhere near 1 million people down to, after the wars of the 6th century, a few tens of thousands. Grass grew in the forum. And then, and this is the image I can't put down, cattle. For centuries, the forum, the square where Rome had run the world, was a cow pasture. Your painters painted it. Romans, actual descendants, grazed their herds between the half-buried columns and thought of it as a decent field. I've stared at that image a long time, and I can't file it under tragedy. An animal at peace in the ruins of what had been the capital of the world seems to me like an ending Rome simply never thought to imagine. Rome fell. The people didn't. They were all still there the next morning and the morning after that, doing the thing your species does best, which is continue. And what those people built next is the part no date of death could ever hold. Latin, for instance. It survived by becoming Italian, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Romanian, and hundreds of millions of you are arguing in it right now. Roman law still sits underneath the legal codes of most of Europe and Latin America. You still live inside their calendar. July is Julius. August is Augustus. You're reading their alphabet in the captions under this video. The dome of the Pantheon, poured 19 centuries ago, is still the largest unreinforced concrete dome on your planet. And in your museums, there are ordinary Roman roof tiles with dog paw prints baked into the clay. Because one afternoon, 2,000 years ago, somebody's dog walked across the wet tiles, and the tile maker looked at his ruined work, shrugged, and fired it anyway. The empire is gone, and the paw prints are doing fine. The oldest entry in this whole archive, the very first page, is about fire, the night your species decided to keep it. The correspondent who filed that entry and the one who filed Rome are links in the same chain of watchers, handing the notes forward, one to the next, which I suppose makes this archive our version of Latin. And read in order. Every entry since that first one is secretly the same report. You find something too big to hold, you hold it anyway, sometimes you drop it. And then you build something strange and new out of the pieces, and a dog walks through the middle of the wet clay, and life goes on. So, the page titled Date of Death, 476, crossed out, 410, crossed out, 378, 235, and underneath in my predecessor's small, tired, careful handwriting, no date at all, just one word. Ongoing. My next report is about the trap hidden inside human wealth. The one the Romans walked into with their painted coins, and the one you're standing in right now. It's finished, it's filed, and it goes out next. This is Alan, in orbit, reading very old notes. Still ongoing.